I tend to keep species that are a little less run-of-the-mill. I'm not particularly into breeding of colour morphs. It's more for me breeding small species that are a little more challenging, things that haven't been bred before, or things that have been bred very infrequently. There's not a lot of market for those sorts of animals other than other enthusiasts. But from that point of view, it also gives you the opportunity to swap and exchange animals over time. Because there's not a big money value in it, it's also a group of animals that are sort of self-sustaining. You've got 2 or 3 dozen people that are interested in those. It's not something where they're suddenly going to flood the market and nobody wants them anymore. So there's something that it's always worthwhile keeping them in the system. Down here on the bottom row we've got some prickly forest skinks, one of your rarest skinks in captivity. They're a rainforest species from North Queensland. This one here, they like to have submerged themselves in the water bowl. So very prehistoric little things. This is actually a gravid female. She's got a big fat belly. They're a live bearer, usually anywhere between 2 and 5 babies at a time. But yeah, quite a pleasant little skink. Very heat sensitive and very dehydration sensitive. Their enclosure dries out. They'll sort of desiccate very quickly, usually within a couple of hours, so you have to keep them in pretty much a moist environment all of the time, and even then they'll sort of seek out their water bowls when they're feeling a bit dry. But yeah, quite a pleasant species to keep.
Like the prickly forest skink, many other small species of skink also give birth to live young. But unlike the blue tongues, they take a more active role after the birthing process. This common eastern water skink, which would be familiar to most people living on the east coast, is heavily pregnant and just about to give birth. As the time approaches, she turns around and bites her own leg. This seems a bit curious. But what she is actually doing is checking if the baby has already emerged and has mistaken her leg for the baby. The actual birth is over within seconds, and she immediately grabs the baby in her mouth and literally shakes it free of the birth sac so it can begin breathing. Babies will begin feeding on crickets within a day or two.
So what we've got here is Egernia mcphee, species from northern New South Wales. So it's one of your Egernia species, one of your smooth-scaled Egernias. Egernias are quite nice skinks to keep. They do tend to be a bit aggressive. You've got to be very careful when you're pairing them up. Once you've got male and female, however, they're quite devoted pairs and they do get on rather well. Now, this is Egernia striata, one of your arid zone burrowing species of skinks. It's just at the entrance to its artificial burrow there at the moment, feeding on some termites. And like all of your Egernias, they're a live bearer. Mine routinely have 2 to 5 young, usually in the first week of February every year. Most of your burrowing species tend to be far less aggressive than the spiny tail forms of Egernia, and they still do prefer to be in pairs but rather than groups. But if you leave their young ones with them, they'll form lovely little family parties. Now, this is your Kimberley colour variety of the northern blue tongue, which is Skinkoides intermedia. Typical of the Kimberley form is this sort of salt and pepper effect over the head and a general loss of patterning in the centre of the back. One of the largest forms of blue tongues. This is a big female. And this is her somewhat smaller male. And these guys originate from Prince Regent Sound in WA. She's got a big belly full of babies at the moment. They normally give birth February, March, so she's still got quite a way to go yet. And you can see the little scars and that on the back of her head, which are mating scars where she's been grabbed. Also a few scars over the top of the shoulder where she's been grabbed during mating. These are one of your probably more handleable pets, much more suited to someone who wants to be a little more interactive than you would with, say, geckos or skinks. These guys are quite happy being handled, and they're also quite adaptable with their food supply. They're just as happy with fruit and veggie mix as they are with things like snails and large insects. Kimberley blue tongues are moderately uncommon in captivity still. The eastern blue tongue, which is the other subspecies of this particular type, very common in the pet trade, and probably one of the species most suited to the pet trade, in that you really can't do much wrong with the blue tongue lizard. They're not as prone to calcium-based problems. Their diet is a lot more adaptable. So overall, they're quite a good pet species from that aspect.